Let's cultivate our motivation. And again, stretch our mind so that we're thinking not only of our own well-being, but recognizing that everybody is just like us, wanting happiness, not misery. Then let's work for the welfare of all living beings. And to do that in a very expansive way, in a way where the benefit we give never ends. Then we want to progress along the path to full awakening, to gain the different qualities of a bodhisattva and a being and a Buddha that will enable us to benefit sentient beings in that very vast way. So to do that, we need to hear teachings and then reflect on the teachings and meditate on them. And so now we're starting that first step of listening or learning the teachings, but with this long-term motivation in mind. So I think, it seems to me that most of you come here because you're looking for happiness. You have a kind heart. You want to do something that is beneficial to others and to the world. You know, you're not coming here to learn how to make rockets or, decipher the enemy's phone calls or make a lot of money or, get a big reputation. Somehow you're coming here with, a good motivation that wants to benefit. And there's so many different ways of benefiting sentient beings. And because this one life appears so vividly to us, and it's so in our face, so to speak, we're usually just engrossed with this life. And then how can I benefit myself and others in this life? And which is very noble. I mean, it's certainly a whole lot better than harming others in this life. Yeah, and so according to kind of regular society, how do we benefit others? Well, there's many different ways. Some people choose a career where, you're directly in some kind of social service, directly benefiting others, maybe responding to disasters or being a medic or a therapist or a counselor or a social worker or a doctor or a dentist or something like that, or certainly a teacher. And then other people want to benefit others in other ways, for example, by doing research, by doing medical research, or by in the arts, doing something in the arts that could be really beneficial for others. So in our regular society, there's many ways to benefit others, and that's really good that people engage in this. I don't think any of you, maybe I'm wrong, work for a munitions factory or an insecticide plant or, something like that. So doing things that keep society going and floating and benefit to people. The thing is, with this kind of benefit, is it benefits people in this particular lifetime, and it benefits the people on this planet. Okay, so we may say, wow, that's fantastic. There's so many beings on this planet, and so even though I can't benefit all of them, at least a few of them, I can do something that's good, and I'm happy about that. The thing is, with benefiting people in this life is, like I said, it's only the ones on this planet, and it's only benefiting them in this particular lifetime. And that's usually because we're not aware, because our society isn't aware of a bigger picture, that there are more beings alive than those on this planet, and that there's a very broader and more expansive way of benefiting them. Yeah. And when we get this other perspective, a perspective where we consider rebirth, and we consider countless living beings who are getting born and living and dying repeatedly, then we begin to see that the fundamental problem is maybe not that they don't know math, or that they they're poor or whatever, but we see that the fundamental problem that is causing this whole system of continual rebirth, wherein in each rebirth there's more and more problems, that this whole thing is fueled by ignorance and mental afflictions and karma. And so while social structures play a part, or poverty plays a part, or whatever, there's deeper causes than what we usually think of from a regular societal view. Okay, and so that those deeper causes, have to do with how we apprehend reality, or how we misapprehend reality, thinking that we are a concrete, self-enclosed person, and everybody around us exists in that way, and everything we handle, has its own inherent nature from its own side. And so because of that misapprehension, then we generate attachment and aversion, jealousy, arrogance, all sorts of different afflictions. Okay? And then we can see more directly what happens when those different mental afflictions run the show in our mind. So when attachment or greed is prominent, what do people do? We take what isn't ours. We look out just for ourselves. We don't care who gets in our way, because we're totally focused on getting what we want. And we can see, therefore, that we do actions motivated by greed and attachment that directly harm others this life, and that put the imprints in our own mind of that kind of behavior and that kind of motivation, and that those imprints, or karmic seeds, or if we're going to refer to last night's teachings, the jigpa, the having happened of those actions, we see, wow, okay, there's a lot of that getting created, and that's going to bring suffering to me, if not in this life, then in future lives. And that's also obscuring my mind from gaining the Dharma realizations. And then we see that, based on this ignorance that misapprehends things, then we get angry, because we want something with greed or attachment, and we can't get what we want. So what do we do when we can't get what we want? And we get mad, and we take it out on others, or we take it out on ourselves. But then, what good does that do? Because we see that, there's so much anger in the world, and we see that so much of the anger is based on this greed. Your greed, and the greed is based on the ignorance. There's this idea of there's a real me, so I have to do everything to protect me, and who's ever close to me, because who's ever close to me is on my side. Yeah, and so we do actions out of greed, and then when those actions are frustrated and we can't get what we want, then we get angry. Yeah, you don't like my ideas, you took my stuff, you undermine me. We know the whole show, don't we? Yeah. So then that creates more actions that damage others and damage ourselves by putting those imprints in our mind. Yeah. Then when we do succeed in getting what we want, we get kind of puffed up. Look at me, I'm so, I'm better than you, and do all sorts of actions out of this puffed up, conceited mind, which again, we harm others, and put these imprints in our own mind stream. And then when we don't do as well as others, then we get jealous of them. And jealousy kind of falls in the anger camp, because it's like we can't bear somebody else's happiness, and so what can I do to destroy their happiness? Even if I can't get what they have, I don't want them to have it. Jealousy is a nasty mind, So again, more actions, more karma, the story. And then, in our spare time, when we're not either puffed up because we succeeded or jealous because we didn't, then we compete with others. Yeah, in an attempt to be better. Not in a collaborative way, where people cooperate and try and work together to create something better, amongst themselves, but in a way where, I want the credit and I'm going to get that first, and, I don't care about you. So, we see that under the influence of these kind of mental afflictions, which trace their way back to ignorance, we create so many causes of suffering, and we experience a lot of misery ourselves. And then just, when these afflictions run the show in our mind on a day-to-day basis, they make us miserable. When we're really greedy, are we happy? Yeah. I don't know about you, but when my mind's really full of I want, there's just so much dissatisfaction that there's no space for any kind of peace in the mind. And certainly when there's anger, there's no space for tranquility in the mind. Yeah. And same with arrogance and jealousy and competition. The mind is not peaceful. So, even in this life, we're not happy, and then creating causes for misery in future lives, and then also affecting others adversely. And yet, despite all of that, we have a good heart underneath, and, you came here with a good heart wanting to learn how to benefit. Right? Yeah? So here we are. It's like, in our heart we have this really wonderful motivation, and yet the ignorance and afflictions just get in the way of actually living according to our motivation. So that's why, from a Buddhist perspective, these afflictions are our real enemy. Shantideva has some beautiful verses, which I don't have with me right now, from his text Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where he talks about, the people who we consider ordinary enemies. The worst they can do to harm us is kill us. Now you might say, well, that's pretty severe. Okay. But when you look at it, from the viewpoint that we've had many lifetimes and that we're going to get reborn? Well, dying is nothing new for us. We just can't remember it. It's happened many, many times before. This life ends, but an external enemy, they can end this life, but they can't make us create negative karma. And they can't send us to an unfortunate rebirth. The most they could do is just stop the life continuum of this life. Yeah. But if we've created a lot of virtue, then by the power of our virtue, we can be reborn in a good life. Yeah. And have lots of opportunities. And so on. So if you look in this bigger perspective, yeah, an external enemy, okay, they can kill us, but they can't make us create negative karma. They can't send us to a lower realm. Yeah. Well, then you're going to say, well, they sure can make me create negative karma. They did this and this and this and this to me, and so I had to stick up for myself and get angry because my anger's righteous, and I need to get angry at them because look at how they're acting. This is totally unreasonable, and for their own benefit, I'm going to punch them in the nose and then stop them from harming other people. Because if I don't stop them, nobody will. Right? Yeah, we think that way, don't we? Don't we? And we act that way. Yeah, and dare I say, the American government thinks that way. Yeah, and then look at all the messes. Okay, every government thinks that way. Yeah, I mean, what Russia's doing too, they're thinking that way just as well. Yeah. So that kind of system, it doesn't it doesn't work, does it? Yeah. So what we're trying to do is, stop creating these harmful actions. And to do that, we have to stop the afflictions. And to do that, we have to stop the ignorance. Yeah. And to stop the ignorance, yeah, we don't do that just by praying. Oh Buddha, please eliminate all the ignorance from my mind stream. Yeah. If it were that easy, hey, we'd all pray to Buddha to do it, and then we'd go off and lie on the beach. Yeah, because all you have to do is pray. Yeah. But you see, it's not like that, because Buddha's so compassionate. If Buddha could have done that, he would have. Yeah. But we're responsible for our own minds. Nobody else can change what we're thinking. Nobody else can change our intentions. No, we're the ones who have to work on that. Yeah, the way the Buddhas benefit us is by teaching us the methods, but we're the ones who have to put them into practice and do something. Okay? It's like, Venerable Yeshe can put out all those ingredients for the cake. Yeah, but Beth has to get in there and make it. Yeah, otherwise Beth isn't going to have any cake. Oh, poor Beth. Yeah, and maybe we should all go in and help, otherwise we won't have any cake either. So, yeah, so, the idea is that we're responsible. We have to be proactive. We have to participate in this by actively transforming our mind. And so that's what Dharma practice is all about. And that's why we're here, because we have some feeling of our good intention and of, some basic internal goodness and potential inside of us that gets, blocked due to all these afflictions. Yeah? Can you see that in your life? Yeah. And so we want to do something about that so that we can really benefit other living beings, not just this life, but for many lifetimes. And not just by giving them food and clothing and shelter, which certainly is beneficial, but if they don't understand how to create the karmic causes for things, then even we give them things, they won't be able to use them in a way that creates good karma. Yeah, or they won't even be able to get them because the karmic causes are missing. Okay, so we can see that sometimes, you send aid to people who are impoverished or in a war zone, and the aid can't get there. There's like all these different blocks of things. I mean, for example, Doctors Without Borders, which is a fantastic organization, they had to withdraw from areas of Burma and several other countries where they really wanted to benefit others because there was just too much warfare there. So, people had given the resources to have the medicines to heal the people who were impoverished. But without the karma for them to receive that, then there's all these obstacles. Yeah? And so, or just other situations, we see that some people are quite well off, and yet they're miserable. Yeah? Do you know people who are well off, or at least middle class, and they're miserable? Yeah, compared to the rest of the world, they live in the lap of luxury, and they're miserable. Yeah, so we see that it's, people have to have some kind of internal cause. It's not just the external environment that brings the happiness. So when we're expanding our mind of how to be of benefit to others, we're also trying to get them to create the internal causes for happiness. Yeah. Not only the internal cause to be able to, let's say, receive the medicine, but the internal cause through practicing generosity so that other people will even give them medicine if they're impoverished. Okay? Because everything we receive comes due to having been generous in the past. Yeah? We may be very wise, but if we're not generous, then we often suffer from a lack of things. Yeah? So we're trying to, when you understand how karma functions, then you see that benefiting somebody isn't just a question of giving them some external circumstance. It's a question of teaching them about how the natural law of karma and its effects operates, so that then they are empowered to create the constructive karma and abandon the destructive karma, that, so that they can experience happiness, and this is happiness within samsara, within the cycle of rebirth. Okay? So it may sound, are you getting what I'm saying about this? So here we're looking at, being a benefit in a very different way. It's not just giving people things, it's teaching them how to work with karma. And in order to teach people how to work with karma, we have to know how to do that ourselves. Yeah? And in addition, if we're going to be able to help them learn about karma most effectively, then we have to be able to pick up where they're at, because different people have different inclinations, different interests, different dispositions. Yeah. So it's not one size fits all. It's not that we're going to sit down the whole world in a big amphitheater and give a lecture on karma and everybody's going to understand it and put it into practice. That's not going to happen. Okay? But if we have some wisdom that can see, where, which kind of teaching different people need at different times. Yeah, and exactly what is most skillful to help them at a particular time. Then we're going to be really effective in being of benefit. Yeah, but to have that kind of sensitivity to others, yeah, we need some kind of supernormal powers. Otherwise we can't tune in, to see where, how exactly it's best to benefit others. Yeah? Because I think we can see from our lives that, have you ever had the feeling that you want to benefit somebody and you don't know how to? Yeah, we've all had that, right? It's like we can see somebody as, I want to benefit. What do? I don't know. Yeah? Or sometimes we try and benefit, and then it doesn't turn out the way we thought it would. And sometimes it turns out really messy. Yeah? So we had a good intention, but we didn't have the wisdom. We didn't have the skillful means. So, we get this wisdom and skillful means through our Dharma practice. Yeah? By purifying the mind, by generating wisdom. Yeah? And sometimes we want to help, and we can see somebody needs help, but we don't kind of want to get involved. It's like, I'm tired, kind of, yes, I can see that person needs that, but I'm exhausted. And besides, they're such a jerk. They got themselves into this situation. I'm always rescuing them. It's like, I'm fed up. Huh? And so sometimes, we start out wanting to help, but our own lack of compassion won't let us. Yeah? Because our own needs are so vivid in our mind at that particular moment. Yeah? So in order to remove all these kinds of hindrances to being of benefit, the hindrance of, it's just, I don't care enough to help that person, which is a lack of compassion, or the hindrance of, I don't know what to do, a lack of wisdom, or the hindrance of, is this right? Is that right? What in the way? How is this person thinking? So we have a lack of skill. So to eliminate those kind of hindrances, then we need to purify our own mind and free ourselves of the afflictions and the ignorance and so on. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes, as they usually say, the blind leading the blind, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, to really be of the greatest benefit, we have to start out working on ourselves. When we're working on ourselves, it's not just with the motivation of, may I benefit from this? Yeah. Or may I become some special person with a good reputation of being able to benefit, They'll put me on Newsweek or, make me one of the 100 most important people on the planet because I know how to benefit. It's not with that kind of motivation. But, really seeing that we need to work at it, and it's going to take some time. Yeah, we're not going to change ourselves immediately. But that's okay. I think the most important thing is that we know what direction we're going in our life, and that we go in that direction. And as long as we're going in that direction, that's good. You know, you can't rush it. You know, you have a turtle and you can't speed the turtle up. Yeah. And so, but if you get your turtle going in the right direction, that's really good. Okay. Any questions so far? Anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if understanding the three kinds helps us to understand karma better?
If understanding the 3 times helps us understand karma better, I think in some way, you know, because we get a better idea of what future is. And because when we learn about the past, we see that those, you know, the past actions, the having ceased of the actions, are the, you know, the thing that carries the potential to experience the results. So then we understand more about the connection between the action and the result. And also because all this talk we're doing about time, the ultimate purpose is to get us to understand emptiness. And so of course when we understand emptiness, then, you know, it aids in the understanding of karma too. Mm-hmm.
This would be a really large question, but we kind of have these afflictions like that, and these habits or these rituals that we do. I guess where do they come from? Or I guess that's really a big question. But you know, I feel like a habit almost, and I know of like beginningless time, but maybe I'm just not grasping that correctly.
Okay.
I just like I feel like it needs to have like a cause or something that causes us to have these.
Okay, so what causes the greed? Is there a beginning to it?
Yeah. Where does it come from?
Okay, where does it come from? Well, the greed, you know, originates in ignorance. Okay? And the ignorance has no beginning. Yeah. Now, our mind likes to find a beginning. But you know, if we were to assert a beginning, okay, like ignorance, greed, these kinds of things, they're functioning things. They cause results, right? So they're phenomena that also arise due to causes. So if they arise due to causes, then you have to have a previous moment, let's say, of ignorance. And that goes back, and you can never get to a point where this was the first moment of ignorance. Because if you had a first moment of ignorance, then what caused that first moment? Yeah? You would have to say nothing. Yeah? But if nothing caused it, how did it start?
When we reach like this point of enlightenment, and that's from what my understanding is that like you hit that point, you're like good forever. I guess like you never go back. And so like how does that stay?
Okay, so if you get enlightened, then how does that work? Okay, ignorance has no beginning because we can't posit a moment before which it did not exist and say that it came out of nothing. But ignorance does have an end because it is an erroneous state of mind. It misapprehends how things exist. And so because it's erroneous, when we generate the wisdom that realizes the opposite of what ignorance is apprehending, then ignorance has no space. Yeah? So it's possible to overcome ignorance and cut its continuity completely because it is this erroneous state of mind. Yeah. If things existed the way ignorance apprehended them, then ignorance would be a correct mental state and we could never overcome it. Okay. But because it's incorrect, it can be overcome. So that's the good news. Okay? Yes, we're ignorant, but it's possible to eliminate the ignorance. Okay? So, the teaching on the Four Noble Truths fits into all of this because we're going to be talking about our present situation, which is the first noble truth. Sometimes they translate it as the truth of suffering, but that's not a good translation. And I prefer here to use the Sanskrit and Pali word dukkha instead of suffering. So dukkha may include suffering and pain, but its larger meaning is anything that is unsatisfactory. Okay? And so, sometimes you read these old or sometimes new Buddhist books where people will say, the Buddha said life is suffering. The Buddha did not say life was suffering. Yeah. The Buddha said we have dukkha in our lives. Okay? Meaning that our lives are not totally satisfactory. Yeah. Is your life totally satisfactory? No. As not only do we not get what we want and we get what we don't want, but just we have a body that gets old and sick and dies. And that's problematic. Yeah. So we may not be experiencing overt pain right at this moment, but it doesn't mean that everything in our lives is totally satisfactory and that there's no suffering, coming in the future. Okay. So we use the word dukkha instead of suffering. Yeah, because dukkha includes anything that is an unsatisfactory condition. Yeah. So in the Four Noble Truths, we're looking at our present situation, the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Then we, of course, want to know what causes it. So we ask, what's the origin of our dukkha? And that's the second noble truth. Okay? Then, the third noble truth, we ask, is there a state beyond the state of dukkha? Is there another possibility for how to be? And the answer is yes. And that's the third noble truth, what we call the true cessation, or the cessation of dukkha and its causes and its origins. And then if that sensation is there, we say, well, how do we actualize that sensation? And that's where we get the truth of the path, the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, the path. And the path here means not an external path to walk. It means a path is a consciousness. Yeah, mostly wisdom consciousnesses. That's what paths are. Okay? So very often we come into Buddhism and we want to hear about light and love and bliss. Yeah, it's like, I have so many problems in my life. Just tell me something good. And then we get the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, and then the cause of dukkha, And it's like, can we skip those? Tell me about true cessations and nirvana. Tell me about the path. I want the light, love, and bliss part. Okay. But the Buddha, being a skillful teacher, knows that unless we actually fully comprehend our present situation in an accurate manner, then we're never going to have the energy, and make the effort to follow the path and to attain true cessations. Yeah, because unless we really understand very clearly all the disadvantages of our present situation, then we're happy hanging out in cyclic existence. It's like You know, let's say you were born in a prison. I mean, there's some countries where, you know, they have a woman who's incarcerated who gives birth and raises her child in prison. Yeah. When I visited some prisons in Mexico, and there were kids, you know, running around there so that they could be with their mothers. So let's say you grew up, you know, in a prison and you didn't know any other way to live. Yeah. Would you want to get out of prison, or would you mostly want to just work for a better situation in prison? Yeah? You see what I mean? So if all you know is prison and you don't have any real idea of the outside world, you're not going to think about getting out. Yeah? And so it's the same with us in samsara. Unless we really see the situation we're in very clearly, we're not really going to try and get out. You know, we're just going to decorate our prison cell. Yeah, make our prison a little bit nicer. You know, let's paint the cell light blue, and, you know, make the bars gold, and, you know, have better food. But we're not going to do anything more than that. So that's why you know, when the Buddha taught, he said, look, first thing you have to be able to look accurately at your present situation. So that sometimes is a little bit unnerving. Well, actually not sometimes, all the time. It's a little bit unnerving. Because, you know, who likes to look and see exactly, yeah, all the pitfalls of, you know, for example, having a body like we have? Yeah? Do we really want to come face to face with all the pitfalls of having a body that gets old and sick and dies? Yeah? It's like when you're healthy, it's like, don't tell me about that. I don't want to hear about that. Yes, okay, maybe it's coming, but later. You know, let me enjoy right now. And then when you start to see, okay, there's all this scientific advancement and da-da-da-da-da, but nobody's been able to stop aging and sickness and death. Nobody. Yeah. And it isn't because we don't allocate enough money to scientific research. It's because from the very get-go, we're born into bodies that have the nature of disintegration and decay. Yeah. In other words, what is the cause of death? Birth. Yeah. We usually think, oh, death is miserable. Birth is good. But birth is good. From the moment the baby's born, they're in the process of dying and going towards death. It's true, isn't it? Yeah? And the moment you have a body like this, doesn't matter young, old, open to disease, always in the process of aging, open to injury, you know, and no way of avoiding that. Yeah, it doesn't matter what country you live in, how much money you have. Yeah, you can hire all the bodyguards you want. It can't prevent aging, sickness, and death. Yeah. So to really look at that situation is sometimes a bit unnerving. Yeah. So already just to look at it, we have to have a certain kind of mental strength. Yeah, a certain kind of merit. And so all of you, you know, have that merit, that internal nourishing of the mind to get yourself here to even be able to listen to this. Yeah. Because, I mean, you're not in New York at a fashion show right now. Why not? Why aren't you in New York in a fashion show? Just lucky, huh? But, because most people say, wow, in New York at a fashion show, men's fashions, women's fashions, make my body young and beautiful and attractive, and that's the way to go. Why aren't you, at the barber shop and the beauty shop and the Botox place right now? Yeah? Or at your dermatologist, to get a facelift and get your eyelashes, to grow back more. And yeah, they have some medicine. I saw it in my dermatologist's office. You put it on and it makes your eyelashes kind of thick again. Yeah? Wow. Yeah. Let's all go there, after the talk. Yeah, why aren't we doing that right now? Yeah. I mean, we clearly didn't create the cause. Yeah. Instead, we created the cause to be here. Yeah, in contact with the Dharma. So to have this kind of, to experience the result of being able to hear the Dharma teachings, we had to have created a lot of merit in the past. Yeah, so merit means, constructive karma. And so here we are. So don't underrate your capability or what you did in a previous lifetime. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Because there were quite a number of people, I don't know how many people, who signed up for this retreat. And then couldn't come, maybe like 10 people or something. There were a lot. Yeah, a lot, maybe more, I don't know, but a lot of people who signed up and then one reason or another couldn't come. Didn't have the cause. Yeah. So I hope they're able to look at it. Are we streaming today? We are. Are people watching it? Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So, we'll be talking about the Four Noble Truths. What I wanted to actually start talking about first was something that His Holiness talks about. Yeah, and he often talks about it before he, gets into his lecture, usually about Four Noble Truths. And he tells the story of being at some kind of interfaith conference, and the moderator at the interfaith conference asked all the participants 3 questions. Okay, and so they asked, is there a self? Is there a beginning to the self, and is there an end to the self? Yeah. So here, self means person. In other situations, self can mean inherent existence, or this wrong projection we have on things. But here it's referring to the person. Okay? So then His Holiness starts and he says, well, is there a self? And so he says, well, it depends. Different religions have different viewpoints on this. Yeah? Some religions say, yes, there is a self that truly exists, that is really the person, that is the essence of the person, yeah, that is unchanging, and that goes from life to life, and is really the person. So some kind of permanent, partless, independent person, or permanent unitary person. And he says people why do they assert that? Why do people believe that? And he says, well, it comes from our daily experience. Because he says, in our daily experience, we do not think that our adult body existed at the time of our birth, do we? Okay. Yet, we say, when I was born. Okay? So actually, I, meaning me right now, that wasn't the one who was born. And yet, we say, I was born. I mean, the I of right now wasn't the one who was born. Yet we say I was born. Why? Because there's a continuity of the self. Okay? And so we feel that self that was born is the same self that we have right now. Yeah? Or we might say, when I was born, my body was this big. Well, our body isn't that big right now. Yeah. But why do we say that? My body was that big. It's, again, because we feel there's a continuity in the person and there's some continuity in the body. Because even though if we say my body, most people would, if we just had the words my body, we would think of this body, wouldn't we? The adult body. But we see some connection with when we were born. So you can see that there's a way in which, because of the way we use language, because of this continuity, that then it becomes very easy to think that there's some real thing that goes from moment to moment. Yeah, some real self that is doing that. Similarly, we might say, today my mind is calm, indicating that our mind changed from yesterday when it was disturbed. But we feel that the I, who's the owner of the mind, is the same. Don't we? Yeah. Yesterday my mind was upset, today's my mind is calm. We feel like it's the same me. And yet, actually, when we examine it, can't be the same me. I mean, we're different than we were yesterday, aren't we? Yeah, the self isn't exactly the same. And yet, there's just this kind of innate feeling that I'm just the same as I was yesterday. That there's some unitary self that goes, from the time of conception all the way through our life. Yeah? And so then, based on that feeling, then it's easy to develop a philosophy. Okay, yes, there's one unitary self that goes through the life, and this self doesn't change moment by moment. It's permanent. It's always there. It's always the same. Yeah. And then we say, and also that self doesn't depend on causes and conditions. Okay, my body depends on causes and conditions, maybe my mind does, but myself is always there. Yeah. Do you have the feeling that you're always going to be there? Yeah? We don't think I'm impermanent and going to disappear. I'm always here. Always. So I don't depend on causes and conditions. Nothing can destroy me. I'm here. Okay. So then we develop this philosophical thing of an idea of a soul. Yeah, and you find that soul in theistic religions, and that notion of a soul, mostly in theistic religions, but sometimes outside, in other religions as well. Yeah, so there's something that is uniquely me. Right? Okay, so while Buddhists and non-Buddhists both accept the existence of a self, how they see this self is very different. So the non-Buddhists see the self, as I just described, as this kind of permanent self, unitary, independent, some soul, the essence of me that is indestructible. And it's very comforting, isn't it? Yeah. Because then you go towards death and it's like, I'm not going to die. There's me that's impermanent, that doesn't change, that's always the same. So I'm not going to really die. Oh, did I say impermanent? Thank you, permanent. Okay. So, so it can be very comforting. And then this soul, well, it's going to, after I die, it's going to go back to God. Yeah. Who's God? I don't know, but the soul goes back to God. Or it merges with this, broad karmic substance, universal mind or karmic or cosmic substance. Yeah. It merges with this, out of which everything is created. So we get more and more philosophy, based on this idea of there being a self. And then you get whole religion structured about this, okay? So although no Buddhist philosophical system accepts the existence of a permanent, independent, unitary self, they do have a variety of ideas of exactly what the self is. So some schools say, well, the self is the consciousness. And some say it's a collection of the body and mind, and some say it's the mental consciousness, and some say it's a foundation consciousness, some kind of consciousness on which all the karmic seeds are put that goes from life to life. So they have various different ideas of exactly what the self is. But according to the Prasangika Madhyamakas, which we say is the highest philosophical view, the self is something that is merely labeled independence upon the body and mind. Okay? Something that is merely labeled, merely, for the Prasangikas, eliminates it having its own inherent nature. It's existing from its own side under its own power. So merely designated or merely labeled, means that the self, when you search for it, you can't find exactly what it is. But when you don't search for it, there's the appearance of a self that is merely designated. So something that is merely designated can't have its own unique mode of being because it's designated, so it depends on term and concept. But it's merely designated, so there's no other self besides what has been designated. There's no self there from its own side that we can draw a line around and say, that is me. Okay? Mm-hmm.
How could things continue, like cycle of reincarnation, if the self doesn't exist without mind and body together and die and mind and body splits? So how does the self continue on through the cycle of reincarnation?
Okay, so if the self is merely designated in dependence upon the mind and body, and the mind and body split at the time of death, then how does the self continue on? Okay, let me put the So this is precisely why some Buddhist schools say that the self is the consciousness, because the consciousness continues on. Except, if you really look, is the consciousness the person? Yeah? Is there anything about your mental consciousness that you can identify is inherently you? It's just a mental consciousness, isn't it? Yeah. So if your mental consciousness were one real thing that had its own nature, and you were another real thing that had its own nature, because you're saying, you need some real thing to go from life to life, some real me. So if both of these, the mind and the self, had their own inherent nature independent of other things, then something would be superfluous. Because when you say, I'm thinking, that wouldn't be correct. You would have to say, the mind is thinking. Yeah? Because if you said, I'm thinking, then I would be doing the same thing as the mind, which would mean they would be exactly identical. But we just got done saying, no, they've got to be two separate things that, unrelated to each other. So then who's thinking? Is it your mind that's thinking or you that's thinking? Or do you have to just say, well, there's no me because it's the mind thinking? But then if we do that, our way of talking to each other doesn't make any sense. And if we say, oh, no, it's the mind, it's the I that's thinking, then you don't need to have a mind at all, because I can think without having a mind. Yeah? Maybe that's what my mother meant when she said, use your mind. You're thinking, but you're coming to the wrong conclusion. So, can we think without having a mind? No. Are we the same as our mind? No. So whenever we assert things that have their own inherent nature, we run into this conundrum. We can't make sense of it. Yeah. And the only way to make sense of it is to say the I, the self, and the mind are related. How are they related? The self is designated by depending on the mind. It's not the same as the mind. It's dependent on the mind. Okay? But it's not entirely different from the mind either. And it exists, but when you look for what it is, you can't find it. Okay? Yeah?
Having possibly added some confusion to this argument. In the Spanish language, they don't say my mind, they say the mind, or like the arm.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've got something there.
Yeah. But it's even though they may say in some languages the arm, or I'm sure they have a personal pronoun meaning mine. Yeah.
Of mine.
Yeah, of mine. Yeah. Where's Laura? Where are you, Laura? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. In Spanish, yeah. How do you say my arm?
Mi brazo.
Mi brazo. So mia means mine, right? Yeah. Huh?
Mis brazos. Or mi brazo.
Yeah, mi brazo.
Mi brazo.
Oh.
Mis brazos.
Esos dos. Okay. Yeah. So even if they would say the mind, which they don't, still there's this feeling of it's my mind. Because you're not talking about somebody else's mind. Yeah. But it does change our feeling if we say the rather than my. Yeah. For example, instead of saying, there's my house, there's the house. Wait a minute. It's not the house, this is my house. It's hard to say the, isn't it? Yeah. You have a bowl in front of you, there's the lunch. Oh, the lunch? Then anybody can come and take it. Yeah. We have this idea of ownership, don't we? Okay, so that was His Holiness's comment on the first question, is there a self? Then is the second one, is there a beginning to the self? Okay, so here he says, well, the people who believe in a real self, they believe that there's a creator. And yes, the creator created the self, created the world, created the environment, created all the living beings in the environment. Yes, the world's created by some kind of absolute creator. And this creator doesn't depend on causes and conditions. Yeah, this creator is something independent. Yeah. And so, again, you can see that on an emotional level, this can be very nice. Oh, there's a permanent creator, who's always there, who's all-powerful, who created me, who will always love me. There's something quite nice. And for some people, not only is that emotionally, satisfying, but it helps them to become better people because they think, oh, I was created in God's image, so I should behave better, I should be a loving and kind person, or God wants me to be ethical, so I will be, live ethically. So for many people, that kind of notion of a creator God helps them not only emotionally, but it helps them to be a better human being. Okay. However, from the Buddhist viewpoint, we don't just say, oh yeah, since there's a real self, then there's a real God or a real creator that created that self. Since our self is a little bit more unfindable, then you have to say, well, how could, if there were this absolute creator, how did that creator create? Okay? Because to create means change, right? If you create something, if we create a meal or a vase or a building, that involves change, doesn't it? We change as the agent who is making something. We change when we create something. So then the creator would also have to change when creating living beings. But then that contradicts the definition of an absolute permanent creator that doesn't change. Okay? And then you get other questions like the ones I asked when I went to Sunday school. Like, why did God create us? Yeah. And the answer was something like God was lonely. But I thought God was perfect. And people who are perfect don't get lonely. So then it was, well, God created us so we could learn and become closer to Him. And then I said, but if God was in charge of it all and did the creation, why didn't he create us smarter and already close to him? Yeah. And then, why is there suffering? Well, it's so we can learn. Well, why didn't God set up the whole system better so we didn't have to suffer to learn? And besides, many people don't learn from their suffering. So, you start asking these kinds of questions, and it becomes difficult to have an answer that is really satisfying, so that you can really think there's some kind of permanent creator there. Yeah.
Could you please say again about how creating creates change?
Okay, how creating creates change. Because when you create, there's an agent who's doing it. There's an object that's getting acted on and that's being created. And there's the action of creating. Yeah. When creating is happening, their cause and effect is operating, because something that didn't exist before is coming into existence. So that means that there's change. So you could say, okay, the world that didn't exist before is coming into existence. But if there were an absolute creator, that creator would have to change in the process of creating too, because the creator is part of the causes and conditions to make something come about. Yeah? And so that's why, from a Buddhist viewpoint, we don't assert some kind of creator like that, because then you would have to say, well, who created the creator? And if the creator didn't have any causes, then the creator is permanent, which means the creator can't change, which means the creator can't create. And if you have a first moment of the universe, and before that the universe didn't exist, then again, what was the cause that started that first moment? If you say there was a permanent God that created all the material, if there was no material being that existed before, then out of what was the material created? And if you have to have some kind of cause that can produce that result. Okay? So it gets a little bit difficult in there. Yeah. So while Buddhism definitely respects other religions and realizes that for some people these kind of views are really helpful, and help them to be good people, we also at the same time question these views in our search for reality, in our search for, well, what actually does exist and how do things actually exist? Okay? So always this questioning to try and explain in a logical way, in a reasonable way, how things come about. Okay, then we didn't get to the third question. Does the self have an end? So we'll save that for next time. Okay. Any other questions on what we've done so far? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so our lifespan in this life. So we may say that according to our previous karma, we're born with, let's say, the potential to live a certain length. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we will definitely live that long. But just because there's the potential for something doesn't mean that thing will happen. Because we may have the potential to live a certain length. And each of us is going to have a different karmic potential, because it's, for a certain karmic lifespan, because, of different actions we've done in the past. But even if we have that potential, if there's some other kind of karma that is very strong, that ripens in the middle of that, it can cut short that potential. Yeah. So that's what happened in this plane that got shot down over, near the border of Russia and Ukraine yesterday. That's what happened there. Some heavy kind of karma ripened at that moment and cut short the karmic potential lifespan of the people on their flight. Yeah.
So what causes one to ripen at a particular point versus
Another one? This is, I think, something only the Buddha can see for sure. But again, it's due to causality. It's like all the different causes and conditions come together. It's like you plant a seed in the garden. Why does the seed grow? You have to have all the different causes and conditions. And there's so many of them. You might say, well, there's not so many. You need the soil and the water and the fertilizer and the sun. Yeah? And then the seed will grow. But it's not always so clear, because it depends on what kind of soil and how much water and when you watered it and how much sun it got and what time of the day it got the sun and what was the quality of the fertilizer. So it's not so simple that there's just a few things. When you really look for that particular seed to become that particular plant, there's so many different things going on. In a general way, okay, for a seed to become the plant, we can say, yeah, water, fertilizer, sunshine, and the seed. But for that particular one to come out exactly the way it did, whoa, there's a lot going on there. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Art?
I'm embarrassed because I've asked you this question so many times over the years. I want a picture. So just for the 1000th time, what is it that does continue on?
So what is it? The I that exists by being merely labeled. That is unfindable when you search for it. That continues on. Yeah. You can say the consciousness continues on, but the consciousness, again, is not something permanent. It's changing moment by moment by moment by moment. And that consciousness, too, exists by being merely labeled. You can't say that there's some inherent quality in each moment of consciousness that is fixed, that doesn't depend on causes or something. Yeah. The question is not to stop labeling. The issue is to stop thinking that the label is the object. It's to stop confusing the object labeled with the basis of designation that it's being labeled upon. Yeah? Because we say, oh, gong. Yeah, no problem in saying gong. It's actually rather helpful. We can communicate. Yeah? But our problem is, I think gong, one unified thing, that doesn't depend on causes and conditions, and that exists inside this collection of parts. So the collection of parts, which is the basis of designation, and then the gong that I've designated, get confused. And I think this is the gong, instead of this is called a gong. Okay?
Subtle but profound.
Yeah. Okay.